And I think that's why there's been some lashing out and anger as to some of the pastors that I write about, because it was like a fevered moment where people just sort of lost all perspective and discernment when they were doing things like that. When we stand back now from the distance of the George Floyd riots of 2020, and some of these pastors are confronted with the fact that, yes, you did racially segregate your church Bible studies.
Well, hello, my name is Ann McElhinney.
And my name is Phelim McAleer.
And welcome to the Ann and Phelim Scoop.
Yes, from Era.
Where there has been torrential rain, but in fact, actually, there's been a break in the clouds. Maybe it's metaphorical. Maybe not, though.
I should translate for people. We are in Ireland.
School is nearly back in session, which means it's almost time for us to take the October 7th play on the fall campus tour.
Yes.
But we still need your help.
Yes, to make that happen.
That happen.
We're going to have an amazing interview with the Daily Wire's Megan Basham. She's a new book out called Shepherds for Sale about the very, very open progressive attempt to infiltrate, and that's their word, by the way, infiltrate evangelical churches to bring them down from the inside. So, you won't want to miss that. Actually, it's one of those interviews. I said it'll only take 20 minutes. I think we ended up taking 40 minutes.
Yes.
We could have kept going, actually.
Yes, I think you could.
Yes.
Yes.
So, and you'll hear wait till the end. There's a very interesting Irish story as well.
And the media don't want you to know about abortion, but we at the Unreported Story Society definitely do want you to know the details about abortion.
The truth
about abortion.
Yeah.
And it turns out, I found a very intriguing way of finding out information that the New York Times, CNN, etc. do not want published. And of course, you've come here because that's where we publish the stuff that no one else will publish.
Yes.
The unreported story, the unreported truth.
And you may have seen it's 10 years since Michael Brown was shot dead in Ferguson, Missouri. And you've seen he's suing, his family are suing such and such a thing under some stupid Inter-American Human Rights Commission. We will bring you the truth about Ferguson, about the shooting of Michael Brown. We will tell you how people reacted when the truth was put in their face. The misinformation, the journalists who are now telling you about misinformation, don't forget, pushed the lies of Ferguson. So, as they say, you don't hate the media enough, but by the end of this show, you'll hate them a lot more.
I love that. Yeah, you just don't hate the media enough. It's, I don't know, we didn't invent that, but it's a great phrase. So the October 7th play.
Let's remind people what the October 7th play is.
Yeah.
After October 7th, we went to Israel. Well, we were in Ireland, actually.
When it happened,
but we noticed, and it wasn't just in Ireland; it was all over. We noticed that people were immediately, Israel shouldn't retaliate. Israel's retaliating too much. Israel's going to turn off the electricity. There was no talk about October 7th. And as journalists, we want to write the first draft of history. That's what journalism is supposed to be. But we realized if we didn't do it, nobody was going to write the first draft of history. And as you know, we do verbatim theater, verbatim podcasts. So we went to Israel in November, interviewed about 20 people, boiled those stories down to the most dramatic events of that day, telling multiple stories, some of them connected, some not.
Extraordinary stories, really amazing. And the people that we met were amazing. I mean, there's some photographs coming up now on the screen. Look at, there's my friend Zaki, the hero,
your crush,
my spiritual crush, I would say. Just a fantastic man, just wonderful person who saved almost 100 young people from the party. And when you start talking, Phelim, there about what happened after October 7th, where the media, where people started talking about everything else except for what had happened on October 7th, to remember, and I remember, I think it was John Andrasik said this, and I think it's a really good point. This was the main target, or the initial target certainly, was a music festival.
Yeah.
You'd expect the following day to have every musician in the world come out and say something about the young people who had been dancing,
or flying to Tel Aviv to do a charity concert.
Yeah.
But
no. John Andrasik did. Our friend John Andrasik did, who you'll remember, by the way, wrote that amazing song for the Gosnell movie.
Yes. So this is why we did the play. And we're going to take it on a tour of the Ivy League campuses. We have a lot to do. That's why we need your help. It's going to cost $350,000 to take it five campuses. We've raised over 200,000. So, and you've been very generous. We asked you to start fundraising last week. You've been amazing. Thank you so much. But time is not on our side. We need to start hiring actors, booking venues. Everyone who's seen the play has loved it. Everyone.
And including, by the way, the extraordinary voice of Alan Dershowitz, who was on our podcast last week. Lots of people I know have listened to that. Go back, listen to it if you didn't see last week's
Let's
podcast.
play a clip.
But let's play a clip from that of what Alan Dershowitz said about the play.
You saw the play. What did you think of the format of it, the verbatim format?
Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, there are plays about important subjects, but they're not structured well and they preach. This just allowed the people to speak for themselves. You were hearing their voices. You were put back in time. You were there on October 7th. There was a TV show. It was my favorite when I was growing up. It was Walter Cronkite. And the name of the show was You Are There. And it put the audience at the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. It puts you, the audience, at Winston Churchill's great speech about blood, sweat, and tears. You are there. And this brought me back to those days because I was there. I went there just a month or so after this all happened, but I didn't feel like I was there. I saw the remnants, but I didn't feel like I was there. I felt like I was at like a cemetery. But when I saw the play, I was there. It's brilliantly structured. It's a play that has everything you want. It has drama, veritas, honesty, emotion. It has everything you want in a play. And that's why I want this play to be seen by as many people as humanly possible, as often as possible live. Look, I'd love to see it on television as well. But what I want to see is as many people as possible having the actors run by them, almost brushing into them as this is happening. When you wake up from a dream, you pinch yourself. Is this real? Here you're touching the people, and the acting was so good.
Yeah.
Thank you. God, thank you so much. And we are planning, Alan, to bring this on a college campus tour of the North, starting in Northeast with 5 of the Ivy League schools, including Harvard, Columbia, Princeton.
If I can, anyway, please count on me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So it was the whole story about the Alan Dershowitz thing is kind of one of those funny things. We got invited to this kind of very posh lunch in New York, and very, very kind people invited us there. Turns out that Alan Dershowitz is one of the speakers at this particular event. Very, small, select number of people at the event. Of course, he spoke like brilliantly. Yeah. His wonderful wife, Carolyn, was there. She, really lovely. We talked to them and sort of said, look, we have this play. We'd love you to come. And, you kind of, and they were very nice. Like, they were really nice. And I thought,
to their credit, they didn't call security and say, can you take these eccentric Irish people away from us?
And anyway, long story short, they came to the play and couldn't have been more supportive, and couldn't have been since then more supportive, by the way, in helping us.
I mean, he's right. I mean, if we do say ourselves, and we're both worked on the play, it's, as he said, you were hearing their voices. It's brilliantly structured. Everything you want: drama, veritas, emotion, everything you want in a play. That's why this play needs to be seen by as many people as humanly possible. That's what Alan Dershowitz says. You've got to help us make that happen. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you. Go to October7theplay.com now and give what you can. I know.
I would say something else as well that I think is a good point. If you're somebody listening and you don't have any money, by the way, everyone has $50, by the way. But anyway, but if whatever it is you have, right? But you might know someone who is better off and would care a lot about this issue. Please do share this story with them. And what we're going to do now is, and this will be helpful for you too, is we're going to show you clips from the play now. We showed those clips last week, but I think it's worth showing them again. This one, it's very hard to choose. We loved our actors so much, but I want to show this clip with Nathan, who was born in Paris. He's Jewish, and he's here depicting, and I'm trying to remember the name of the character actually that he's depicting. Kappa. I think it's Dor Kappa and Dor Kappa's girlfriend. Yes. You've got to watch this. Let's watch this clip, and I think it'll inspire you to want to help us.
Lolly helped me navigate.
Okay, turn right. No, don't go over there. There's birds flying from the trees. They're shooting people over there. Okay, go between there. Take a left here. Go.
There were 3 of us in the car. My friend Gilad was in the back. Lolly, my girlfriend, God, she was so calm. She was in the front with me, and I'm driving. These Hamas vehicles, they're barreling right towards us, guns and everything. Lolly was hiding. And this one guy on a motorcycle, this terrorist, he was so close. I was staring him right in the eyes, and him back at me. And I nod to him like we know each other, like we're together. And he nods back at me, like you're okay. And then he sees my girlfriend, he starts shouting in Arabic, shoot the Jews, kill the Jews, slaughter the Jews. I take a big left. One bullet hits the back door. Gilad starts yelling. Fuck, I got shot in the head. Don't worry, I'll get us out of here. My girlfriend starts to pray.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai.
It's the guy on the motorcycle, he tries to shoot again, so I swerve into him. He flies off of his bike 2 meters into the air, into the fields. And then another. So I just turn into him, I just catch him with the back of my car, and he flies off. I swear, if I had had a camera attached to the car, I could have sold the footage to Spielberg himself. I did what I did, my girlfriend said the prayer, and then I did what I did. It's not even about the prayer, it's about what I had to do.
I could have sold the footage to Spielberg himself. As he says, it so reminded him of his Israeli uncles, you know. Oh, I was in the Yom Kippur War. I fought 100 hours. You know, it was that kind of.
But it also reminds you that this was the thing that struck us about Israel. These people, we were talking to people weeks away from the most traumatic thing that had ever happened to them, and many of them, like every person we spoke to, had lost either family members or their closest friends.
I think Dor Kappa went to 30 or 40 funerals.
Unbelievable stories. And you know, in the middle of all of it, there was this humor that you get to hear there from that character, from Dor Kappa. Anyway,
why do we need to bring it to campuses, Anne?
Well, you know, what I'm going to do, actually, I think that is useful here is we're just going to put up on screen here some screenshots of some very recent headlines that appeared.
Yeah.
And you probably, quite a number of you probably have heard what the federal judge had to say about what happened at UCLA. And here's the headlines. I think this first one's from the Wall Street Journal. UCLA must ensure equal campus access to Jewish students.
Yep.
I mean, but you read that and you kind of think, I mean, am I reading, you know.
Is this 1934 or 2024? Is this 1934 in Germany?
Yeah.
Or is this 2024 in UCLA, Los Angeles? I would say the third biggest concentration of Jewish people on the planet after
Tel Aviv or something.
Israel, New York, and then LA.
And here's another headline from the New York Post, and I saw one of the quotes on this, actually funny. I read the comments on this as well. Brave judge defends the Constitution in ruling on UCLA's Jew exclusion zone. But I thought one of the commentators actually on this piece basically said, no, brave. You know, you shouldn't have to be brave to be upholding of the Constitution. And you know, and I mean, just extraordinary. But interesting, the fallout, you know, and this is another headline we just got this is from the New York Post. This is like yesterday's headline, so a couple of days ago. To realize, so every graduate of one of the elite New York City Jewish high schools is avoiding Columbia for the first time in decades.
This Upper East Side Jewish high school has had students going to Columbia every year for decades. I mean,
of course they have.
It's the hometown college.
And
this year, not one of them is going there because, you know what? Who wants to go? You know, only people from Northern Ireland go where they're not welcome and they're hated, like me. You know, or you know, only journalists. I mean, I suppose journalists tend to forget. Like most people aren't like journalists. Most people don't run towards the fire.
Towards the fire. No, no.
Yes.
But then also, you know, we're also planning to go to Rutgers, and here's you know, a headline again from the tablet. Why I left my faculty position at Rutgers.
Yes.
And can you read that, Phelim? Your eyesight's better than mine.
Well, I mean, I just want to say something about the tablet. Thanks for not reviewing October 7 play.
Thanks, tablet. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for not responding to any of my emails. And
yeah, there you go.
Anyway, tablet, which is hugely concerned with that.
I knew things, and here's this woman, and her name is Rebecca Sispa. I think I can see it there.
Cyprus.
I knew things had gone badly awry at Rutgers last year when a masked participant in an anti-Israel protest on campus proudly proclaimed, dying as a martyr, dying as a hero is one of the greatest sacrifices you can do as a Palestinian and as a Muslim. In other words, self-martyrdom through suicide attacks against Israelis was not only justified, but praiseworthy.
Yeah.
So she moved on. She decided, I don't want to work there.
And
And
then-
actually went to Yeshiva University.
Yeah, Harvard. This is another headline. Harvard failed its Jewish students and must face anti-Semitism lawsuit. Judge rules. Pennsylvania students testify in state capitol about college anti-Semitism. We could go on and on and
I
on.
think it's interesting to get the quote here, actually, from the woman in charge of Hillel at Penn State. And she said, we didn't feel safe on campus for most of the fall semester following the attack. And that was Mackenzie Boren, who's a student.
So listen, so we're going to go to Columbia, Rutgers, Princeton, Harvard, and Penn. You know, that's the start. By the way,
and by the way, that's a very good point. That's the start. And we've had inquiries. We've had people asking us to go to Berkeley. We've had people asking us to go to Drexel, and we've also had people asking us to go to Florida. But I won't mention another person who wants us to go somewhere because it kind of identifies her too much. But anyway, we're getting invitations.
Once we get the tour on the road, we'll keep going on and on and on.
That's right.
You know.
Yeah.
So yeah. Oh, we should add.
We should add.
Go to October7theplay.com and we'll just put up the address now where you can send a check.
Yes.
By the way, also.
You'll see that on the screen now.
We're a 501c3. All your donations are tax deductible.
And by the way, I'm going to also say that we'll leave that address will be at the end of the show. We're going to put it back up again.
Can I just say something?
Yes, you can, Phelim. You can say anything
it's
you
not
like.
In
it's
the
your
script.
podcast.
What's our podcast?
Oh, stop it now.
You know,
behave yourself.
23 years, eh? We're still sharing a podcast.
Oh God, I hope we're not sharing a podcast in 23 years' time. I don't mean that the way it sounds, but I mean, yeah, go on ahead there. Phil.
Yes,
what did you want to say?
I forgot. So, Candace Owens.
Oh God.
Yes, God is far away from whatever she's at the moment. Did you see the latest one about, what was it, Sigmund Freud and is Kabbalist, and was it child sacrifice, and
she's really gone off the deep end.
No. Look, this, and I'm looking at you people out there, and I am looking at you people out there. We gotta stop. The moment anyone with a little bit of color on them comes forward and says, I'm a conservative, we gotta stop giving them a Bible and reducing standards. We are conservatives. We believe in
meritocracy.
We don't believe in affirmative action. So we shouldn't believe in affirmative action for our politicians. And, you end up with Candace Owens, who never had the intellectual chops, right? She was a good looking person of color.
Correct.
She never had she didn't do the reading. I know some other young people who became very prominent, and they didn't have the intellectual chops. But to their credit,
they did the reading.
Okay,
Phil, you have an interview now.
Well, I just want to say it's also Michael Steele. Same thing. That guy, he became chairman of the GOP. Right.
I remember my favorite Michael Steele story is I was on stage speaking somewhere. Cannot remember where, but what I do remember distinctly was I was on stage sitting beside. Wonderful. Mrs. Wonderful Shafley woman. What was her name?
No. Did she not speak up from the audience? And you were sitting beside Michael Steele, weren't you?
Okay, I can't remember where I was sitting. Okay, but I was at the event, and Mrs. Shafley. I'm trying to think of her name.
Phyllis Schlafly,
of the
Eagle Forum.
Extraordinary Phyllis.
The
amazing Phyllis Schlafly. And you kind of look at her and you think, well, she's just a lady, nice lady, very correct and all that. And he saw her. That's it. He saw her from the stage, and he was what was he? The head of the RNC.
Yeah, the chairman.
He basically said, "There's Phyllis Schlafly. Oh, I love you.
I want to hug you.
I want to hug you." And she stood up.
She's about 100 at this stage.
She stood up and said something. Now I am paraphrasing, but it was something like,
"I don't need your hugs.
You need to sit. I don't need your hugs. I need you to listen to the Eagle Forum,
the grassroots.
We know best what's happening at the local level. We don't want head office in DC telling us how to." And she just gave this thing and she said, "I don't want your hugs. I want you to listen to the Eagle Forums."
Yes, and listen to the grassroots, and we know what candidates work best in our areas. So listen to us.
Stop employing expensive consultants who don't know anything.
And then Michael Steele, of course, when he went for some higher position in the GOP, didn't get it. Claimed racism and is now an analyst at MSNBC.
Isn't that lovely? Okay, Phelim, you're going over to an interview you did earlier.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, so leftism actually you could say leftism is why there's so much anti-Semitism. It's not anti-Semitism; it's identity politics, and identity politics chooses groups who are winners and losers, and good people and bad people, and the Jewish community have been chosen by progressives as oppressors. So leftism is also making inroads into Christian churches, and it's a deliberate ploy. They need it's a huge, solid voting bloc.
Yes.
It's actually one of the few. Funny, the white Ann Coulter makes this point. White people are the only swing voters out there. Black people don't swing.
But as you say, it's a very big block. It's a very big.
So if you can chip off a few percent of them, you can win a general election. So Megan Basham has written a book about that. It's called Shepherds for Sale. So let's go over now to that interview that I did earlier. So I followed with interest Megan Basham on Twitter. She's one of those voices that has a clarity, I would say a consistent moral clarity on Twitter, which is not easy, by the way. That when I saw she'd written a book, I knew I need to bring it and her to our audience. So here we're now with Megan Basham, who is a journalist, author, and commentator. She currently writes for the Daily Wire and is the author of a new book, Shepherds for Sale: How Evangelical Leaders Traded the Truth for a Leftist Agenda. It's just been released. It's one of those books, you know, it's actually, you could call it one of the most discussed books on Twitter. It's attracted a lot of attention and some, I would say, disingenuous reviews from people you wouldn't expect to give disingenuous reviews. We'll talk about that. So here, to cut away from all the misinformation, we have the author, Megan Basham. Thank you for joining us, Megan.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to be here, Phelim. Great.
So I suppose this is one of these books where actually, thankfully, the title speaks for itself. There's nothing, it's not a metaphor. It's just saying it straight. Shepherds for Sale: How Evangelical Leaders Traded the Truth for a Leftist Agenda. But aren't evangelicals, you know, now on a Trumpian wave, a right-wing Trumpian wave? They've never been more powerful. Why did you feel the need to write this book saying that they're actually becoming leftist or progressive?
Well, part of it was because there had been such a cottage industry, as you point out, of books and articles insisting that evangelical leaders had sort of sold their souls to MAGA and to become Trump supporters. And one, I didn't see that. I just saw evangelicals consistently voting the way that they always had. If you looked back at George W. Bush or Mitt Romney or McCain, those numbers were pretty consistent. So they weren't particularly more supportive of Trump than they were of any of the other GOP candidates. And they largely pinpointed the same reasons. The issue of sanctity of life was very important to them. And then also kitchen table issues. They tend to be more fiscally conservative. So I really saw very little there in this argument about evangelicals being suddenly rabidly power hungry through Trump, even though there was so much coverage on the left. And then when I started looking into it, what I did in fact find was that there was a lot of covert politicking coming in from the left. So you saw that in some really concrete ways with left-wing secular billionaires pumping money through their foundations into evangelical ministries and what I would call front groups. And they were explicitly designed to move that all-important evangelical voting group to the left on issues like immigration and climate change legislation. So that was one part of it. And then also you started to see a lot of softer politicking from pastors who were starting to use their pulpits to bring in very critical race theory friendly type of verbiage. Sometimes I don't know that they even knew what they were saying, but they were picking up the cultural cues from our dominant power centers and reflecting them back to the people in the pews in ways that struck me as incredibly unbiblical. And so, you know, all of that is what I covered.
Yes. No, you did indeed. And I want to try and talk about as much of it as possible. But you start off the book, you introduce the book with a few stories about a couple who moved from Georgia, the state of Georgia, to LA. And they tried hard to find a decent church, thought they had found a decent church. And next thing, they were asked by fellow church members to go to the anti-Trump pussy hat march, and they weren't really into wearing hats that represented female genitalia. They thought,
Right.
but they thought this is just LA. Then they moved back to Georgia, and they found basically the same, as you say, the cultural cues were coming into the church in Georgia. This just wasn't an LA issue. This is right in your local church right now.
Right. So, one of the experiences that I documented with that particular couple, once they got home from Los Angeles and they're back in Georgia, they were surprised to find at a very mainstream conservative evangelical church, they were put through what the husband described to me as a struggle session at church. The pastor got up and said that the white people in the congregation needed to collectively repent for systemic racism and for the oppression that had been suffered by the Black members of the church and for the privilege that they held. And they were asked to get up and applaud to show that they were repenting. And it was just such a stark example of how this left-wing ideology was coming into the church because, we can have a lot of debate over what is driving demographic inequities in different ways. And it was by no means something that this couple agreed that, yes, we as white people are responsible for oppression of Black people. And so, a lot of experiences like that in the church.
I just mean, for you mentioned that the woman in that couple, I mean, she had the worst childhood imaginable, or one of those really bad. I think the father ran out and the mother was never there. She raised her own siblings, a really hard. There was no white privilege there, and I really enjoyed the idea that the white people at these struggle sessions, they weren't allowed to speak for 6 months. But then when one guy spoke after 6 months and questioned some of the data that he'd been told, he was put back in the penalty box and said, "No, you can't speak for another 3 months." It's almost funny.
Right. When we look at it, it almost feels like, and I think that's why there's been some lashing out and anger as to some of the pastors that I write about, because it was like a fevered moment where people just sort of lost all perspective and discernment when they were doing things like that. When we stand back now from the distance of the George Floyd riots of 2020, and some of these pastors are confronted with the fact that, yes, you did racially segregate your church Bible studies and said, we're going to have some church Bible studies that are just for our minority members so that they can lament. Or to say that, yes, we're going to have these Be the Bridge studies where you white people don't get to speak for 6 months. And if you question police shooting data, well, then we're going to further penalize you on another period of not being able to talk. I mean, when you hear that now with a little distance, I think there is embarrassment. And I think there is a desire to sort of pretend like that didn't happen. And I think that's where part of the anger is coming from some of the pastors that I name. They're upset that because they know that they did this and they were sort of hoping that we would all forget.
Funny, that is the thing that, one of the things I've learned about life is you only get angry when someone calls out the truth. If you were making stuff up or misinformation or they would just laugh it off. But when you're telling the truth, that's when they really get angry. And you talk about why people do this, and of course, money is a great motivator, right? There is money. There's a lot of money from the federal government to support vaccines, to support climate roundtables. Climate roundtables, that's just basically, here's a few $100,000. Bring your friends for a climate roundtable, pay them 10,000 each and pocket the rest, or whatever. It really is, and live stream it and make up. Say it reached 2 million people, and everyone's happy, and you become co-opted. So there is money, but you also, and this is the little talked about weakness of conservatives, the desire for, as you call it, institutional prestige.
as you say, it's a potent elixir. Tell people what institutional prestige is, and it's. I mean, listen, it's a very addictive elixir.
It is. And I think when you look at what happened with some of these institutions and these individual evangelical leaders, I'm not always convinced that it was the funding coming from the secular billionaires like George Soros. That's absolutely a factor I document in the book. But, it struck me, for example, when you read Russell Moore, who is now the editor in chief of Christianity Today and was formerly the president of the policy arm of the largest Protestant denomination in the US. When you read in his book, pretty apropos of nothing, that he was invited to a White House Christmas party, it seems pretty evident that
Sorry, Megan.
he was delighted by that.
Sorry, I have to stop you. It wasn't a White House Christmas party.
It was Obama.
It was the Obama
White House Christmas party. That is true. It was. So it was
the coolest Christmas party in Christendom.
And so, you take note of that, and you take note of another pastor I talk about, a really well-known megachurch pastor, best-selling author, Rick Warren, talking about being invited to Davos to, rub shoulders with the most wealthy, most powerful, most influential people in the entire world. And so it's hard to miss that they clearly had their heads turned by this in some degree. So you have these incredibly elite, incredibly fashionable, influential organizations like the WEF, like the Council on Foreign Relations, the UN, and you are some person who grew up, in some red state, small town, coming up through a Southern Baptist church.
Yes.
And suddenly there is a desire to see yourself as a part of what these elite people are doing.
Yeah, look, my wife says that it's all high. We're all at high school. We're all still at high school, and everyone wants to be with the cool kids, right? And there's, I was kind of joking, but I wasn't. There's nothing more cool than an Obama Christmas party at the White House, And you're right, and yeah, that Russell Moore story, yeah, that was Russell Moore. That was right. And you talk about him later. He was the pro-life, and I want to come on to the pro-life story. He was the voice of pro-life for decades, and then when Roe versus Wade was overturned, he was nowhere to be found. But I just want to, I want to say something, and this shows me in a bad light. But look, I can understand people, climate. Sure, what harm will it do if I become an environmentalist? Everyone's nice to the planet, and issues like that, right? But I must say, I went straight to the pro-life section because I read I read the climate first, and then I read the introduction, and I read another chapter. But then I went to the pro-life because I thought, I can see them rationalizing in their mind. Listen, if I go a bit soft on climate and get invited to Obama's Christmas party, and what harm is saying, oh, we need to be nicer to the planet? But pro-life, like, how did they actually, this is a question, and maybe you can't tell me the answer. What's going on in their heads? Because there's a difference in my mind. There's just this qualitative difference between going soft on the environment and going soft on pro-life.
Well, what I can demonstrate in the book, and do demonstrate in the book, is how they behaved when the Dobbs decision came down that overturned Roe v. Wade. And we were just talking about Russell Moore, and he was well known as one of the most outspoken pro-life church leaders in the country, and in fact had written a book on the subject, and was the sort of person that every time some major paper was looking for a comment, they went to him. So when that Dobbs decision came down and he was utterly silent, that spoke volumes. And we can't get away from Trump in that question. Why were they suddenly silent? And the reason is because so many of them had staked a position as never Trumpers, which that's fine if that's what they wanted to do. But they didn't just stake the position as never Trumpers. They suggested that evangelicals who, as I said, voted for Trump at about the same rate that they voted for all these other GOP presidents had somehow discredited themselves morally for making that choice to take Trump up on his offer to appoint pro-life justices to the Supreme Court, Well, obviously, regardless of what has happened since then, Trump kept that promise. He did appoint 3 pro-life justices. The Roe v. Wade decision was overturned, and that put them in an incredibly awkward position. So I think that's first why you saw that silence. And then the next thing you saw was this rush to try to redefine what pro-life meant. And
Can I, sorry to interrupt?
Mhm.
I can understand the not wanting to praise Trump, right? Because that's, these people, the snobbery and
Mhm.
they didn't come and tug their forelock to me and be nice to me, so therefore I'm a never Trumper. I can understand that, and Trump, not wanting to give Trump any credit. I can understand that, but you go on to show how they basically became less pro-life. They, as you say, they redefined what it means to be pro-life. So sorry to interrupt you, but
No, yeah.
to me, this is a thing. This is beyond the pale. But go ahead.
Well, so the first thing you saw when that decision came down from people like Russell Moore and Beth Moore, who, if you're not familiar, is a very well-known women's Bible study teacher, leads massive conferences, and some others like that, were to emphasize a need for a greater social safety net to make that Dobbs decision morally legitimate. So suddenly they were saying, okay, church, if we're going to have back to this guy to get this decision, well, now what we need to do is be willing to expand our welfare entitlements to ensure that women don't feel like they need to get abortions. Well, one, that ignores the broad swath of research that shows that actually most women don't get abortions because they're impoverished. That's not why they get them. And then the other thing it does is it ignores how we have seen those very kinds of entitlements impact other communities where the abortion rates are incredibly high. So I was looking at the Black community, which has the highest rate of abortion, and it also has the highest rate of entitlement usage, from SNAP food programs to rental subsidies and things like that, and the abortion rates are incredibly high. So there's no evidence that keeps people from getting abortions.
In fact, you could argue that, I mean, who knows whether it's correlation or causation, but if you wanted to, you could argue that this two seem to be connected. The more welfare that's there, the bigger the abortion rate. Sorry to interrupt you again.
No, I think that's a great point, because part of what I explored is what it did is it has made men obsolete in a family.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there is no expectation then for men to marry a woman that they may have gotten pregnant, because we can all say better for it to not go in that order, but it is traditionally a major reason why people have gotten married throughout history, that men had an understanding, I am now obligated to care for this woman and this child. And so the other thing you saw them do was then suddenly say that, well, being pro-life doesn't mean you have to vote for pro-life candidates. So essentially you saw people like well-known theologian and Redeemer New York City pastor Timothy Keller saying, well, the Bible tells us that human life is precious and that we should support the sanctity of human life, but it doesn't tell us how we are to do that. So we may not need to vote for pro-life candidates in order to do that. And it was an equivocating that you just never saw before. And so it was this attempt to say, if we believe that a pro-abortion candidate is advancing policies that might still result in fewer abortions, that wasn't true either, but that was their argument, that if we believe their policies will result in fewer abortions, we can still go ahead and vote for a pro-abortion candidate. So this was the kind of really tortured logic that you saw so many of these leaders rolling out in order to try to accommodate the left.
Yeah, I remember before Roe v. Wade fell, and it was clear that it was definitely going to be undermined. At least I had an interview on the show and with a political analyst, and we both agreed that the biggest challenge that the fall of Roe v. Wade was going to be was not the Democrats, because they were just going to keep going. It was going to be for these pro-life Republicans who were hiding behind the fact, well, we can't introduce pro-life laws because it'll be overturned by the Supreme Court. Suddenly they were going to have to introduce these pro-life laws. Suddenly they're going to have to be attacked at dinner parties and out to lunch and at dinner, and their children are going to be called names at school, and they're going to be called names, and they're not going to be invited to the cool kids, and they're not going to be invited to the Obama Christmas party. Sorry to keep, but that, to me, that's just,
Yeah.
it's a great, thank you for putting that in. I think everyone understands what that means. Actually, I never thought that this would extend into the Christian churches. I just never thought the rot or the cowardice, or whatever you want to call it, has gone that far.
And I think that's why, by the time I wrote the book, it's been a little surprising to me that some are trying to deny what's happening, because I think the broad swath of Protestant evangelicals have known what was going on for a long time. And a good deal of the response I have gotten from readers is not, I was shocked to find out these things were happening. It was to say, oh, you explained to me why what I already noticed was
Yeah.
happening.
Well, by the way, that's a wonderful compliment to any journalist because often you read something going, I knew that, but I'd never really defined it before in my own mind, and you really think, you go back and look who wrote that, because they actually said something that you knew was true, but you'd never articulated it. So well done. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, and that was really my aim, was to show we all already agree that it's happening, except for these leaders. Everyone generally agrees that this has been going on. It was really a question of how did we get here? So, and that is why the book was titled what it was, how evangelical leaders did it, because a huge proportion of the American church kind of already agreed that it was happening. And yet, strangely, I think there's been so much leadership that maybe because they are in these elite silos, did not realize how widely it was recognized. And they seem to be a little shocked to find out how many people are buying the book and are going, yes, we believe this because we've watched it happening ourselves.
How deep would you say it goes in the Protestant churches? I mean, have you lost them? Are they gone, or can they be salvaged?
Well, the nice thing about, in a way, the evangelical churches is that there is no formal authority structure, and it's so diffuse. So I think
we Catholics would disagree that that's a nice thing.
I know it's a feature, not a bug, I swear. But part of what that does is I think it allows some institutions to be recoverable. I mean, there are some that I think are so compromised that I don't really see them coming back. I see them going the way of mainline institutions or being abolished altogether. I talk a lot about the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, which is that policy arm of the largest Protestant denomination in the US. I think it is wildly out of step with the rest of that denomination. And I think it barely survived a vote to abolish it entirely this year. I think that will continue to happen. And I don't really think that organization is recoverable. There are some seminaries that I don't think are recoverable. I think they will go the way of the mainline seminaries. So that, that you would not be surprised to see them draping their schools in the rainbow flags in a few years, the way you now see with an Episcopal cathedral. But there are others that I think there are leaders there who just kind of went along with the tide, even if it wasn't their instinct. And my hope is that this book will actually arm them to push back, that maybe it will give them the journalistic backing and the investigatory backing to be able to say, look, people aren't happy about this. We need to deal with it. So that is my hope.
Well, as I say, it's something that's very useful to have your thoughts articulated by a third party. It's very interesting. We talked with the Catholic Church, because the trend there at the grassroots level, and certainly in the seminaries, is that it's going more conservative. And it's the conservative, the Latin masses, that are attracting people now, not the mainstream churches, part of the church. I mean, has anyone worked out that this doesn't work, by the way? I remember a headline I saw in the New York Times about 8 years ago. Despite embracing environmental concerns, churches are finding numbers are dropping anyway. And I'm going, it's not despite, it's because, that's one of those famous New York Times headline. It's because they embrace environment. I mean, you'll never be, if you're an environmentalist, why wouldn't you go to Greenpeace? You wouldn't go, your local church will never be as radical or powerful or toxic as Greenpeace or one of these other ultra radical organizations. So if you're looking for something in your soul, you don't go to the church for environmental. So if you go there for this watered down environmental policy, you'll just lose interest. So it doesn't work. It doesn't get people in. So is there a sense that people understand that, or are they only concerned about now? What do you think?
When you pull back and you look at that, it seems like that should be the understanding, right? If you look at the Episcopal Church, any of these other mainline churches, they diminish as they go left. Because as you say, when there isn't a bedrock of something real there that is truly grounded in scripture, people tend to drift away because they can get that social interaction somewhere else. And yet, on an individual basis, you continue to see that kind of compromise in order to obtain worldly approval.
Yeah.
And I think the phenomena of it is they're not thinking about, okay, what will this in the long run do to our institution? It's the very close focus on, well, what am I getting invited to? What is this doing for me personally as a person of stature? And so I think that they do not look at it that way because they don't have the long-term health of the institution in mind. They have the immediate health of their career in mind.
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, you name names. Maybe I don't. You name Rick Warren. You name
Yes,
Rick
Rick
Warren.
Warren.
There, when we did the Gosnell story, and we're trying to raise awareness for the movie. People say, "Oh, you got to reach out to Rick Warren," and we reached out to Rick Warren, and he was stunningly unavailable. And even some of his funders reached out to him, and he just, he palmed them off, and there. A lot of I don't think, hopefully your book will, I don't think it's permeated to the donors, to the people who are keeping this thing going, that's where they're going. And it needs more people like you to point this out. I want to move on to the reaction to your book, just to wrap up. Tell us a little bit about that. You've had some, I call them disingenuous reviews, and they were disingenuous. I've read a lot of the book, and it's like somebody read a different book. But tell us about that, and tell us what that says as well in your mind.
I mean, what I have seen is one, an excessive literalness as an attempt to discredit it. And you will see them say, well, I did not take a check from George Soros, so I should not be in this book. Well, one, I explain in the introduction that I'm talking about various kinds of for sale because we can all sell ourselves for different things. It doesn't have to be, a envelope of cash at midnight on the train tracks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's one, is that I think that's been incredibly disingenuous. And then the other is this little trick that you will sometimes see these pastors do when they are trying to introduce more progressive positions into their institution, is they will give a full presentation that is entirely of one opinion, of one mind. Let's say on something like climate change, it will be that climate change is an existential crisis, that Christians need to get involved in it, that it should be understood as part of our pro-life ethics. And they will give this entire presentation. And then at the end, they will say, but, I'm just saying, study it for yourself, check it out for yourself. And it will be a couple of sentences in, say, an hour-long presentation. And it's really a cover to say, don't take the other 50 minutes of what I said seriously. And of course, I think that's a silly game, and I'm not going to play that. I do take what you said in the full presentation seriously. And a quick disclaimer at the end does not discount how you chose to use your influence in promoting this particular policy. So that's been part of it, is that they want to focus on a quick disclaimer. And then in other... on other occasions, I've just seen, and I really can't understand it other than it's a move of desperation of people to say, I was misrepresented. For example, a really well-known Southern Baptist Convention former president today came out with, well, you misrepresented me. Everyone understood at the time what I meant, except that after 2 years of sort of public outcry about his statements, he himself had to come out and reverse and say, oh, I misspoke about the Bible whispering about sexual sin.
Yeah.
And both of those things don't make sense. You can't say everyone understood what I meant, but
Yeah.
also 2 years later, I had to issue corrections because apparently a lot of people did not understand what you meant.
Oh yeah, that was a very who was that spoke that the
J.D.
Bible?
Greer,
What was the name, sir?
a pastor named J.D. Greer.
Yes, the Bible was whispering about sexual
Whispering
sin.
about sexual sin. And you know, one of the things he advocated and later didn't fully walk back, but tried to sort of moderate, was advocating that Christians use pronoun hospitality in regards to this transgender issue, that if a person is in your life or it comes to your church, you as a Christian should consider using their transgender pronouns to show hospitality.
See, that's another one. I can see why several years ago, at the beginning of this, that you would, oh, well, what's the harm? Well, we know what the harm is now.
Right.
How do they square that circle, or do they?
Yeah, as you say, I think that's part of the anger is they're not really trying to square the circle as saying it's impolite for you to now bring up what we have kind of tried to move away from and pretend that it didn't happen now
Okay.
that the light of time has illustrated how foolish it was.
Yes. Well, at least they're admitting that it was foolish. I think I'd love to talk to you more, but I think we'll unless what I mean. How's the book doing? I'm sure it's doing very well.
It's doing very well. We hit the New York Times bestseller list first week of release, and we expect to be on it again this week. So it is clearly getting a lot of notice. And I think that what's that?
Sorry, that is amazing. I don't mean that the way it sounds. I mean,
yeah.
In some ways, this is obviously it's not a niche book, but
I expected it to be more of a niche topic, and so I'm a little surprised myself. And I think that's the other reason you're getting some of the pushback is I think had the book not hit the bestseller list, they probably would just ignore it.
Yes. Have you had many mainstream reviews? Have you had many mainstream conservative reviews also?
Not yet. I mean, it's only been out not quite 2 weeks, so maybe that is yet to come. But I've had a lot of podcast interviews, a lot of interest in talking to me. Only a small handful of reviews though from conservative publications. So
yes. Well, these conservative publications, we got to take back the culture. We got to take back the culture. Here's a book that's part of the culture and wants to take back silence, crickets. It's like, well, you don't want to take back the culture then. But anyway, that's my little.
It's an important part of the culture.
Yes. Well, that's great. So the book is Shepherds for Sale: How Evangelical Leaders Traded the Truth for a Leftist Agenda by Megan Basham. Is that how you pronounce your name?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Available, I assume, in all good bookstores and online.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes. How do people follow you?
I'm on Twitter, or X now, as we're supposed to call it, at Meg Basham. I'm on Instagram at journalist Megan Basham, and you can always find my work at Daily Wire, so dailywire.com.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. Continued success, and we'll be keeping an eye on this book. Hopefully, it'll remain in the bestsellers and make some difference, because it definitely it's a shocking book. Actually, in some ways, it's a shocking book because you think you know things. You think I thought I knew who would be in trouble when I thought I was being smart. Oh, the Republican politicians are going to be in trouble. I didn't realize that had got into the churches. But funny enough, I had experienced it myself, but I hadn't articulated it. Because I noticed when we were doing the Gosnell thing, all these church leaders with their mega soapboxes that could have pushed Gosnell, pushed the book and pushed the movie and the podcast, silence. And I was thinking, okay, well, maybe it's a money thing. Maybe maybe they're busy, but no, it was the wrong issue. They don't want, you're not going to get invited to Davos if you are talking about babies being butchered in the womb.
Yep, absolutely. And I hope if you haven't already, go back into the introduction. I have a little bit about how this touched Ireland as well. That might
Well, no,
interest.
funny. Yes, no, Atlantic funny. I was going to mention that. I had it here in my notes, and I thought, people don't. I don't want to bring in the Irish thing, but yeah, Atlantic philanthropies. Yeah, they. I'm glad you brought it up. They wanted to. How can we change Ireland? Basically, how can we? And basically, I think they used the word co-opt the churches.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like
Get the
they
money in.
acknowledge that they said the problem is, how do we turn people against an institution in which they find faith and hope? And they said, well, our problem is we need to not oppose the church. We need to infiltrate the church. And they devoted a lot
That
of
was the
money.
word. I used a better word, co-op, but they actually used the word infiltrate. Yeah, I had that on my notes, and I skipped over it because I thought, look, it's better to talk about Georgia and LA rather than Ireland. But yes, no, it's a process. I mean, and you also mentioned this is not new, by the way. This has been going on. The communists,
Yeah.
The atheistic communists realized, well, actually, we could be more powerful if we get in and co-opt the churches. And so there was a whole Russian infiltration plan to infiltrate the churches between 1920 and 1950. And I really love the organization whose name escapes me now, who were were pro-Hitler or pro-Germany, anti-Russia anti-America coming into the war until Russia became an ally. And then suddenly they just switched overnight and became pro-America coming into the war.
Yes, the American Peace Mobilization. And that's kind of the same thing that we've seen in the last few years with some of these Protestant churches. They immediately went from being anti-war until suddenly Stalin wanted America to enter the war, and then they became pro-war. And I feel like you've seen that on so many of these issues, whether it's, the CRT, the critical race theory. And as soon as they became unpopular, it was sort of like everybody ran to get over to the other side and then pretend like, yes, we were always over here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Megan, thank you very much. So it's called, just to remind people, because I really want this. Okay. I'm telling you out there now, you have to buy this book. We have to make sure that it stays in the New York Times bestseller list. So it's Shepherds for Sale, How Evangelical Leaders Traded the Truth for a Leftist Agenda. Buy it for yourself and buy one copy for your niece who is urging your church to become more progressive. Okay. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Really interesting.
Yep. Yeah. No. I mean, as I say,
let's make very sure, by the way, that we put in the show notes the link for where you can buy the book.
Yeah, that's in the YouTube. We'll put that in the YouTube channel. Don't forget to leave some comments. I mean, I did deliberately leave out the thing about the infiltration of the Irish church, because I just thought, well, it was that's how much is in the book. The book is packed with just great information. It's really well written. Couldn't recommend it enough. So please buy it and let us know.
Support her.
Yeah.
I mean, she's already on the New York Times bestseller list.
That's right.
But let's keep her there.
Yeah.
So, abortion is going to be incredible. I just segueing quickly on to this next issue, which is that abortion is going to be a huge issue in this election. Kamala Harris has distinguished herself in California by attacking our very dear friend, David Leiden, the journalist who has done more to expose the truth about the abortion industry than just about anyone.
Yeah.
I think that's very, very fair to say. I think we might come in second or whatever, or third, whatever, with the Gosnell movie. But honestly, what David did was mind-bending. And because it was so powerful, and because it was truthful, and it was actually unimpeachable, because of that, Kamala Harris went after him with lawfare, trying to shut him down, trying to get him locked up.
Lawfare is, I'm
going
to... the criminality. She became a criminal. He's facing felonies. She seized his journalistic product. You know.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is not. Lawfare is too kind.
Yeah.
She's involved in criminal persecution.
So she won't stop. And as at this point, it's pretty clear that Democratic and they're having their convention right now, but the Democratic position on abortion is up to 9 months, and in some cases beyond 9 months. So what we're going to do is continue to do a kind of a deep dive, and I'm doing these Substacks telling the truth about abortion, things that you will never, ever hear or read in the New York Times or CNN, or, by the way, anywhere on any news show on TV. And what I've found is a massive treasure trove of information that that I can get my hands on, which is academic research papers from universities and from people doing, research studies all over the world. And if you think about that, there are research studies into just about everything.
Yes.
The mating habits of the gnat. Well,
Yes.
by the way, along the way, there are people who decide, you know what, I might look into this abortion thing and find out some things.
And a lot of these people will be pro-abortion.
They're definitely pro-abortion, which is kind of an interesting thing. But so anyway, I found a bunch of papers, and I'll be going through them and talking about them. And I'll also put up a link to the Substack that I did on this.
Yeah.
But I found one academic paper called "It Makes It More Real: Examining Ambiguous Fetal Meanings in Abortion Care," which is kind of like a lot of words.
And who wrote
to
that?
say something very simple. It's written by Andrea Becker and Lena Hahn.
In the Journal of Social Science and Medicine, and was written in 2021.
And what they talk about is what they do in the paper is they've talked to a lot of abortion providers, and they have quotes from those abortion providers. And it turns out there's a whole bunch of things that people who work in the abortion industry don't talk about.
Or don't talk about publicly.
Don't talk about publicly. Excuse me. Yes, don't talk about publicly. And in fact, they do a thing called, they basically self-censor. And in the academic world, where they're talking about abortion, they've come up with a phrase for it. They call it danger talk.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, danger talk is any talk that could give any wind to the sails of the pro-life movement.
Can I paraphrase what danger talk is?
I know. Go on.
It's called the truth.
Yeah.
The truth about abortion.
The truth about abortion. So I've got a few examples here. And again, you could look at the whole Substack. I'm kind of very proud of what we've discovered there. I mean, amazing. So here's Frances, one of the people that they spoke to, So she's, she works as a patient advocate in an abortion clinic.
Uh-huh.
And again, this is from an academic paper, and describes what it was like for her to see the result of an abortion. I remember, and we're going to put this quote up on the screen so people can read it as well. I remember being a little shocked, like, oh my God, if an anti-choice person saw that, that's the thing that freaks people out. This is a tiny little human, and it has all of its limbs. You always see the pictures that anti-choice people protest with mangled fetuses and stuff. I had never really connected that to our work. So I was like, wow, actually, at this point, this is a little fetus. So
that's danger talk.
That's danger talk.
The little hand,
The little hand. You're not going to hear that. So Frances goes on, by the way, because they do this quite long interview with Frances, and she goes on to explain that the abortion industry, euphemistic language that they use, so they have Planned Parenthood. It's exactly the opposite of that, right? So that the euphemistic language actually creates complications for women who are having these pill-induced abortions.
That Plan B or whatever, it's immofisterone. It's when you have an abortion at home and you take a pill.
And then something happens at home.
Yes.
And basically, because the abortion industry are constantly talking about clumps of cells, a real problem emerges when it comes to the fact that a person can take this pill at home, and that's not what something is,
is expelled.
Is expelled, and it's a little person. And here's what Frances says:
of cells.
You can't just pretend it's a ball of tissue at every point. That's what it is at the beginning. And you're also talking about fetuses. And for women who are doing medical abortions, and you're saying, "Oh, you're going to be passing tissue," and they get home and pass a fetus, they're going to be like, "You didn't prepare me for this at all." You can't just skirt around the idea of fetuses so much that you pretend they don't exist, and the women aren't going to be dealing with that. Then she goes on. I'm going to do a little bit of this, but I want to get past this. But Lindsay, another person that they interviewed, an abortion doula, by the way, interviewed for the paper, said that viewing earlier abortions is easier than viewing later ones. But by later, she means 3 months, by the way.
Post 3 months.
Post 3 months,
Post 12 weeks.
And here's what she says. When I saw, however, a 13-week product of conception, that gave me pause. Spiritually, it breaks my heart sometimes to see a 12 or 13-week product of conception. Now,
well, why do you keep doing what you're doing?
Why do you keep doing, But because they have to do it so often, clinic workers get desensitized and dishonest. Euphemistic language is intentionally employed to help them.
Is that them speaking?
That's me speaking.
Yeah.
To help them dehumanize the baby. So here's another person, and this is another quote from the paper. Rosa, a medical specialist for 14 years, says, I remember my first second trimester procedure. It took me a couple of days to process. I had to go home and think about that because it's, I don't know if I can think about a word. I think it's definitely something you need to process. I'll bet you.
Yeah.
But anyway, and okay, this last one I want to do, this Maggie, another one who trains nursing students. So here's her quote, and I quote, "I walk through the technical process of a surgical abortion, and I never shy away from saying, and depending on the gestational age, there may be little arms and legs. As an abortion providing community, we need to not be afraid to talk about that reality. Certainly fetuses have arms and legs and heads and spines and internal organs. This whole thing about the clump of cells, I don't think it does anybody any good." This is what she says. But there's a reason why they talk about a clump of cells, because if you are running $1 billion business, which it is, $1 billion business,
Multi-billion.
the last thing you want is to have the people who are your customer have second thoughts about spending the money and keeping the baby. So follow us on our Substack. So if you go to Substack, go to stories.io and you'll find all our stories there.
Yeah.
Phelim,
and there's a link in the description of.
And there'll be a link and a description exactly about that.
Yeah. So it's 10 years since Ferguson.
Unbelievable.
Since Michael Brown was shot dead. And there are all these articles about his mother's been interviewed. She's suing the authorities. A grand jury found that Michael Brown, the shooting was justified. Barack Obama's Department of Justice found the shooting was justified.
Yes.
If you read the transcripts of the grand jury, you see...
Which we did. So that you don't have to.
You can see that it's justified. We did a verbatim play, just like October 7th, based on those transcripts. And I mean, let's just play a little clip of the lady at the end, the 17-year-old.
Yes.
Who avoided the subpoena for months, who is a black liberationist. But listen to her tell the truth about what happened to Michael Brown. By the way, this is after he broke up and assaulted an immigrant shopkeeper, after he attacked a cop twice.
Tried to grab his gun,
was shot, ran away, ran through a grassy knoll, decided, you know what, I'm going to go run back and attack that cop. He had ultimately
charged on him.
So let's hear that.
Yeah.
He kind of just dropped. Like he stopped and kind of like fell forward and like smacked the ground with his face.
Okay. Now, did you discuss what was happening with the other people that were in the car with you?
The only thing we said was, well, my mom was like, "Did they shoot him?" And I was like, "Yeah, they shot him." I was like, he just shot the fuck out of him. That was all that was really said. But, you know, we never really talked about it since then.
So you never, you didn't know that your mom had spoken with the police, right?
Yeah, but I was trying to avoid her giving them my name. So yeah, I really wasn't talking to her.
All right, so now you're saying that you didn't want your mom to give to the police your name? Is it because you didn't want to be involved, or is there another reason?
Because I did not want to be involved. And I didn't want to be sitting here doing this.
You characterize it as charge. Could he have been staggering?
When he first started running, ma'am, he was not staggering. He was charging this officer, and that's how I feel it was. Like, he was running towards him like a football tackle. Like he was going to tackle the officer. If he got close enough, I feel like he would have tackled him against the car.
And there's no way he could have been saying, you know, "I'm hurting, I'm giving up." There's no way you feel it could have been mistaken?
No, it wouldn't have been mistaken.
This is really important.
I'm not, you know, really big on talking to the police or defending police or anything like that. I'm just being real honest with you.
That's all right.
I feel like the officer was in the right. And that is a lot of saying. Because other than that, I ain't got nothing to do with them.
I mean, do you feel that this could have ended up any other way?
Yeah, it could have. If Michael Brown had just stopped running, yeah, it could have ended a different way. That's the other way. It could have ended another way. The officer had no choice. He could have had another choice, but it could have ended in him being physically hurt.
So that, I mean, so we did the play, we filmed it, we filmed that version of the play. It's not a full version of the play, you know, it's just people talking, but it's them recreating everything. Every word you heard there was from the grand jury testimony. That's a real person. That's the voice. Those are the words of a real person, recreated by an actor. You can go to watch the full play at fergusontheplay.com. That's fergusontheplay.com.
We'll put a link in there as well. Put a link into the show notes.
Look, go and watch that. It's
brilliant.
It's brilliant.
It's riveting. Now, the version that you get to see there is a version that we filmed especially for YouTube.
Yes.
But the actual staged version, I'm just going to put up a few photographs there from the staged version. It was amazing. We were in New York. We also had it
in LA.
In LA, we had Ann Coulter sitting in the front row.
Yes, but do you remember
Dennis Prager? Do you remember?
But also I should have said when 9 of the actors walked out in LA because they couldn't handle the script. They couldn't handle the truth of mostly black voices. You know, you hear, oh, there's no roles for people of color. I had a whole play full of roles for people of color, but the people of color were not keeping to the script. Actually.
Yes.
You know,
they weren't mentioning the fact that Michael Brown never put his hands up and said, don't shoot.
Hands up, don't shoot. Yeah,
that
piece of misinformation to use it.
Oh, yeah. Talking about dishonest journalism. By the way, they're trying to put people, they are putting people now in prison in the UK, by the way, for misinformation. And I'm just wondering, when are they going to put the BBC into prison? When are they going to put the New York Times?
Yes.
When are they going to do that? Because the misreporting, the misinformation about Michael Brown and the hands up, don't shoot, caused the deaths of countless people, and it caused billions of dollars of damaged property, and no one has ever been held accountable for that. If you're going to start to lock up people for disinformation. Anyway, we've come to the end of the show, and we want to remind you again that we are going on this fall tour, and we really do need your help and your friends' help. To go to October7theplay.com and donate.
Give what you can.
Give what you can.
Send it to anyone.
Give what you can't give. Give more than you can give. What about that?
Give more than makes you feel comfortable.
Yeah, that's right. I remember somebody writing that very thing when they were giving money to help us make the Gosnell movie, and somebody said, I've given you more than I'm comfortable with. But she said, you know, she talked about, anyway, what she actually said was, but my discomfort has nothing compared to the discomfort of the babies that were massacred at Gosnell's clinic. Okay, on that unfortunate
Checks can be sent to this address.
Checks can be sent to this address, and we are so appreciative of all your help.
Thank you so much, and see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
God bless.
When we'll be back in the States.
And we'll be back in the States. In the sunshine. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.